My name is Leah Hayes, and I'm an illustrator, also a graphic novelist.
Welcome to the Picture Booking Podcast. My name is Nick Patton, and I have the honor of hosting this interview today. Enjoy.
I wanted to touch the sun. It felt so warm on my skin. But my mom said, "You cannot touch the sun. It's too far away." So I asked my dad to take me, but he said, "You can't go to the sun. It's too hot." I went to find my older brother because I knew he could help me, but he said he had more important things to do. So I decided to go by myself. I'll stop there. It's a cliffhanger. Anyway.
I love it. So, before we get into my thoughts about this, just tell me where to start. What's the inspiration behind this? Like you said, this is your first picture book.
Yeah.
What motivated you to create this story?
So I historically have only written for adults. I write graphic novels, and they tend to be kind of darker and definitely for adults. And I am still published by a company called Fantagraphics Books. And I've been with them for years, and I've always loved children's books, and they've been a huge influence on my life. But I admit I did have children, and that kind of put me over the edge when I had my first child about 4 years ago. Children's books took on this greater meaning for me to read them to him and now my daughter. So I was feeling like I'd love to just give it a whack. And it was funny because having been an illustrator for a long time and having written lots of other books, in my mind, I was like, a children's book would be so easy. It's shorter, it's simpler, I'll just throw this out there. And it was so much more difficult than any book I've written so far for a lot of different reasons. But, essentially because you have to you have fewer lines to say to get across something really important. And I mean, there are lengthy children's books, but yeah, I just felt like it was so much more challenging, and that was a surprise to me. So I'd say my inspiration was having children, essentially, to answer your question.
Yes. So the story of touching the sun, where did that idea come from? I mean, I'll stop you before you answer that question. There's some books that, very few, some books that I read that I'm like, I love them, and I don't really care about the answers that you're going to give to me because they're just so special in and of themselves for me. And this is one of those books where it's like it hit me. It's such a perfect picture book in a lot of ways, and we can get into it. We can get into why I feel that. But it just immerses you into this world, and it does so much that I just absolutely love, and I love getting to share this with my kids because it's one of those books that speaks to childhood in such a profound way. So I'm being very vague because I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
that's really sweet. Thank you for.
So I'm just interested to know where the core of this idea came from. And then how you made it so perfect.
That's really nice. That's very kind of you to say. And I'm glad to hear that you read it or you read it to your kids. I mean, I think the idea of the sort of like inner light and like the sun being metaphor for, like a life force, I guess, it was kind of where I was going with it. And but I guess the inspiration was probably my own life, and like how I've definitely taken some risks and tried to reach for some goals that either other people said weren't possible, or at first I didn't believe were possible, and then I kind of jumped off some metaphorical cliffs and, you know, reached things that I didn't think I could. And I think part of what helped me to reach those goals was this sort of like inner belief in myself. And so I feel like the sun represents that kind of like finding your inner warmth, I'd say, or your inner light, I guess, and um keeping that with you and knowing that that's where your strength comes from. And you know, the boy does go to an impossible place to get that, to find that sort of light, but then I think the end of the book, and I really have to give kudos to Enchanted Lion, the editors and the publisher, for they really helped me craft the ending more than I could have. I had a whole different ending, and they basically helped lead me to see a better way that I could resolve it. And they were so right. It's so much more about the boy sort of not just finding this inner light, but then maintaining it on his own. And that kind of resonated more with me about my own life. So yeah, so like we're all on our own path, and you have to find your own light, and then you have to hold on to it and stick it inside you. That's kind of like, I think, the vibe that I was going for.
Yeah, I love the time you take in the beginning to have him go to each family member to, like you said you have this dream, right? I want to touch the sun.
Yeah.
Impossible dream. And you go to each of your family members, or you go to your, you know, I imagine you in your life, as you were saying, that you have these moments where you went to somebody and said, this is my dream, I want to touch the sun, and they're like, you can't touch the sun.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you to take the time to walk us through that, and then to take the time at the end of the book to bring us back down from that experience, and to take the time to see what came out of that.
Yeah.
I love both of those balances.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. I'm glad it came across.
Was there, when you were thinking about this book, was there other books or titles that you looked at to give you inspiration for what came out of this?
Yeah. So, you know, I've always been obsessed with children's books, even as a kid. My parents are both wonderful artists, and so we had a lot of really beautiful books in our house and in our bookshelves. So I always was poring over children's books and illustrated books in general. It's what made me want to be an illustrator, sort of growing up in that environment. But I really love like very detailed line work children's books, you know, like Shel Silverstein, or I don't know, Peter Spire. I don't know if you know Peter Spire's books. He does like these really detailed line work books that don't always have words to them, so they're like essentially like silent movies, visual silent movies, and they're just so beautiful. And David McPhail, but we have this is just coincidence, but in this office here there's a David McPhail original painting, that drawing that my parents had. And yeah, I just, anything that was like super crosshatchy, super detailed. Maurice Sendak I was obsessed with. I feel like there's so many.
Well, also that's good. I mean, Maurice is the person, when I read this book, or Where the Wild Things Are, the story itself, it feels I feel like there's a parallel in the sense that this is where I think Where the Wild Things Are and in your book, which I'm sorry to compare, because that's a big comparison.
Okay.
But it, like,
no, that's very fun.
They both have this real childlike experience where you're in this safe space. Like you know, your boy is in his look like his backyard. He's with his family. It's just in his yard, and it's a very small, intimate space. And then he has this outrageous experience, and I feel like that's childhood, right? Where you're like, where
Yeah.
a child is, when they feel safe, or I mean, maybe safe isn't, I keep using the word safe, but they're in this comforting small world, but then they use
Yeah.
their mind to just like explode it into these, the things that a grown up could never even
Yeah.
dream
Yeah.
of,
Totally.
right? And I feel like that's the sweet spot of where the wild things are, and that's the sweet spot of I Touch the Sun too, where you get that experience. And I think it, as kids read this, as kids experience it, they're gonna see themselves in that. And yeah, I just think it's just a beautiful book to add to that sort of imaginative, safe space, creative uh repertoire in picture books. It's beautiful.
Thank you for, thank you. It's really nice.
So, your book covers uncertainty and hopes and fears and dreams. And these are sort of complex things that you're throwing out there for children. Why make a
Hmm.
book like that?
Well, again, I think that I've always gravitated towards children's books from, especially I feel like from like classic children's books from the 60s and 70s. Um, maybe not, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't put like decades on it, but I do think that there's like sort of a time where um writers for children's books didn't feel afraid to put a lot of like darkness or fears or address fears and stuff in like a really real way into children's books. And I mean, like Roald Dahl or which I was obsessed with too growing up. Like kids can handle, not only can handle, but like need to sort of be exposed to in some ways, like something that reflects either fears that they're having in their life or fears that they might um, come across, or like darkness is okay for kids to some extent. And um I think sometimes now we're like too afraid of darkness. And I'm not talking about like disturbing darkness. I just mean like concepts like bad dreams or, fears. Like kids have these fears. So I have always liked children's books that delve into that stuff a little bit. And again, I have to say it was really Enchanted Lion, the team at Enchanted Lion, especially my publisher, that was helping me really push me to throw in some ideas that were darker, scarier, like lines about the child saying, well, when he dreams, sometimes his dreams are scary and dark, and like just throwing that out there and kind of letting it sit. And um yeah, I think that's also how I've noticed my own children who are 2 and 4, like especially my 4-year-old who's like starting to express fears about stuff, like being afraid of the dark or things like that. And they kind of come out as these momentary things, and then but he doesn't like dwell on them. Um, or he asks sometimes about, death, or like, what is this? Or why do people die? But then just like moves on to playing with toys and stuff. And so they're like these ideas that are like definitely percolating in children. And then, but it doesn't mean they're like burdened by these ideas, like adults are. So I think that with children's books, one of the cool things or roles that they could play is that they touch on issues that we think are adult issues, but don't necessarily like dwell on them necessarily. Anyway, there's lots of ways to address difficult things, but I think one way to do it is to kind of like pop in some ideas and then just have them be and move on from them too, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I
I don't know if
totally. I mean, that's interesting because it as an adult, we tend to like try to I don't know, maybe it's just me. I know I think there's other adults, but we all carry this baggage, right, of junk
yeah,
with
yeah,
us. And
yeah,
we feel like, oh, we don't want to burden this child with our big adult
yeah,
things, but this is, but and maybe kids have better perspective, like you said, they talk about death and then they move on and they play. Um but it's
yeah,
not like it's, I mean, death is things like this are all around us. This is part of
yeah.
what it is to
It's
be
part of like,
human. This is
yeah,
part of the game that we were all playing. Um,
Yeah.
and I think they understand that, and to meet them where they're at, and have it just put it in there and let it go. If they want to talk about it, it's a great way to talk about it then, and it probably would be just a 2-minute conversation. And if they
Yeah.
don't want to talk about it, it's just something that's there, and that's
Mhm.
life. Like, things are going to
Yeah.
happen, death is going to be experienced, um,
Yeah.
and other dark things, scary nightmares, and being afraid of things, and um,
Yeah.
putting it in that safe space where you have a story and a parent and a child together experiencing that story. I mean, I think it's such a great opportunity, and
Yeah.
there's so much conversation that happens around a book when it's nighttime and you're reading, and um, maybe you read it several times before that topic even comes up, um,
Yeah.
but it
Or,
gives you an entryway into those things.
yeah, and there are those books that, and there's books and shows and all kinds of tools that exist just for kids specifically to help them understand or grapple with harder subjects. And there's literally like books obviously for children about how to deal with the idea of death, or grandparents dying, or pets dying, or loved ones dying, and or I mean, I'm using death as an example, but there's all kinds of
Right.
literature for children
Right.
about all kinds of different subjects. But then, and that's great, and those are there for that purpose. But I kind of like the idea of just like having a book that's not really focused on helping walk a child through something specific like that, but just more of a passing comment. Um, but yeah, and I don't, and because the book is about light, and again, this is like where my publisher brought this point in, and she's amazing. Because it's about light, we felt like we needed to address dark, because if it was just about the sun and the sun is inside you and touching the sun, like I feel like that would have been fine. But I think it's really cool to have the counter, like there's also the time where the sun goes away and there's darkness, and nighttime can be scary, and what does that mean? Or just at least to bring it into the story for a minute.
Yeah, I love all that. So can you walk us through your creative process for this book, and how you sort of develop these characters?
Yeah.
And
Well, this was a little unusual for my process because, like I said, I've spent, decades writing graphic novels, and my process for this was so different because I started writing it when I was pregnant with my second child. So I sort of had kids a little bit later in life, and I had always had like ample time to like sit and write books and comics and stuff. But this is a totally new experience where I had a new child, like a 2-year-old, and then I was pregnant with my second, and I had this idea for a book, so I was like writing it while caring for this other kid and dealing with pregnancy, and then I had the baby, and so like I was editing it post post having a child, and it was just like really intense. I mean, I know lots of moms do that, so it's I'm not the only one, but it was crazy. And my husband was amazing and helped. Like I couldn't have, I literally couldn't have written this without him or without Enchanted Lion. The editing process for this was really different from my other books because I like I said, I published my grown-up books with Fantagraphics, and they are amazing, and they're also, I'd say they're a little bit more hands-off in some ways, with the editing, or they have been with me. I mean, they work with me for sure, but Enchanted Lion was like so specific and delving into like I was saying, like the concept of the book and changing the ending and literally helping, like, what if you tilted this flower in this direction and not that one? And it was like it was nothing I'd ever experienced, and it was so humbling and cool, and felt, at the beginning I was kind of like, what is this? What do you mean move a flower? And then I realized that they were right for most of like all of their ideas were like incredible. And then um it felt really good to have people care as much as they do in this. They have so much integrity and as a publishing company, and it made the book better. So that was the process was I was having a baby and I worked at night or like while I was nursing, and it was totally bananas. And then it took a really long time to come out because I didn't move very fast. Usually I move faster, but I was, there's a lot going on.
So could you just discuss the character design in this book and kind of explain? So the main characters, the boy and the son, have really simple features, but your secondary characters, like the family, have these complex and detailed faces and features. So
Yes.
why? I mean, I can answer that.
Why?
Why?
Yeah.
Why?
A good question. And I hope that people ask that question because it's really intentional. So the answer is that I have an answer ready because I've thought about this a lot. I have always been able to draw realistically. Like that was sort of when I was younger, that was like my thing. I was so proud of myself. I could draw like, I was like all about cross-hatching, and drawing just realism was like sort of my goal. And then I went to college and found this other style that was more cartoony, and I loved that style as well. And all my other graphic novels ended up sort of being in that style. But I never was able to reconcile them. And in fact, I would even like have conversations with my dad about like, he'd be like, what's your style? Like, like, are you going to choose one or the other? And I was really conflicted about it. And even when I was teaching my students, I didn't really know what to tell them all the time, because I'd have students say like, I can draw in this style, but I can also do this. And like, which one should I choose? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know what to choose all the time. So finally, when I had this when I had this opportunity to write the children's book, I was just like, you know what? Screw it. Like, what if I just put these two styles together, literally side by side, and just did it with total intention, like just really owned it and pretended that that was how it's supposed to be, and just, maybe people would buy it, so to speak, not literally buy it, but maybe people would just like accept it. And they did, in the sense that I just did it, and I was like, that's how it's supposed to be. I didn't excuse it or explain it. And then when I sent it around to get published, people did accept it. And I even asked Enchanted Lion like well into the process, because I had never asked them early on, but well into the editing process, I was like, hey guys, did you ever wonder why these two styles are together? And they were like, no, we just we just thought that was how it's supposed to be. So that was my personal reason. It was kind of like a triumphant, like, I'm gonna mesh these styles of Leah Hayes together in a book. But then also historically, it is a little bit of like the Charles Schulz thing going on, where like the grown-ups, in Peanuts or in Snoopy, you never see the grown-ups. You like, and you don't even hear them. They're just like trumpet sounds talking. And like basically grown-ups are kind of this like mythical, mushy soundscape, but the kids are really defined. This is kind of a reference to that too, where like, even though it's the opposite, like the children just look different from the grown-ups, and no one explains it. Just because grown-ups seem and look different to kids, I feel like. So that was kind of like that reference for me, but mainly it was like a giant personal thing where I was just like, I want these two styles together.
I love it. I love that answer.
That's all.
For me, it was this. I thought it was brilliant but for completely different reasons. I felt like when it's a simple illustration, it's easier. I feel like it's easier to fall into it and to project yourself into it. And then when it's more complex, it feels like the other. It feels more separate from you. So you had your main characters that for kids is going to be easy to project into, and
Yeah.
these other characters are separate from this world that we're going to experience. So they are more detailed and they feel more separate, and it works so well with the story. I just, yeah, it's
No, that's a good way to put it. Maybe can I use that? And
yeah, next time.
I'm
Next
just
time.
kidding.
Should I ask the question? Oh, no, your answer was
No,
brilliant.
no,
I
no.
loved it.
No, that's I was like, that's a really good way to put. I mean, that you're kind of saying what another way of what I'm saying too. So
Hmm.
that's yeah, right. Like the child drawing is more relatable. But that's cool. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad. Again, my biggest nightmare about this book is that people will either read it and just be like, "Oh, did she forget to draw the kid better?" Or why is there so much white space? But those two things, they were intentional, and luckily I feel like no one has said that yet. No one is like, everyone's responding how I hoped they would so far. So, but
Well,
yeah.
what did so like you've mentioned, you've got experience as a graphic novelist and doing other
Mhm.
illustration work. How did that experience help you create this picture book, or did it, or was it a completely different feel?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I'm not I mean, it helped me. I understood the process of writing a book and editing and stuff more because I've done a bunch of books before. But like I said, this was really different, and I think I'm not sure. I don't know the answer. I guess it just I guess this felt really, really, really different, and it didn't feel like anything else that I've done process wise. So I'm not sure if the other comic world related experiences added to this. But I definitely so I obviously write stories and write comics, and visual storytelling has like been my thing for a long time. And I teach graphic novel writing, and I teach visual narratives and stuff at the university that I teach at. But so telling a story in a simpler way than I'm accustomed to, because I've told these more complex stories before, um, or I've told stories in a complex way before, but narrowing it down to like a couple lines per page was really challenging and different. Um, so yeah, I'm not sure what the answer is right now. If I'm not sure how they related to each other yet, except that I mean, I was familiar with the process, um, and yet it still this still kind of kicked my ass. If I could say that on a children's book show.
You can.
Um,
Usually, I'm the one that has to stop myself from saying you're more than welcome
yeah,
to.
this totally kicked my ass. But it's so I was teaching a course. I mean, I have been teaching a course for many years about, like I said, visual narratives, and a specific course about how to get published, which is a really funny thing to teach because you can't really teach it. But it's in the course, I have a lot of students who tend to want to write graphic novels, which has always been my specialty. So I was able to totally talk about that, totally help them all the time. But I would always have these students that would be like, "Hey, I actually want to write a children's book. So can you walk me through the process?" And I was always like, "Sure, I can." And I would talk about like what I kind of thought or knew about children, but I'd not ever written a children's book before. So the fun thing was then this whole last year, as I was teaching the course, I was like, "This is what you do, and this is how you edit." Like I was like, I know now. So bring on those questions about children's books. And I'm not like an expert because I've only made one children's book, but I was just so excited to finally be like, yes, I can help you. This is what you do. Yeah. I don't know if that answers your question at all.
No, it's great. No, it's awesome. I had a question earlier or later on, kind of about your teaching, and it's kind of the same thing. It sounds like it was kind of like the opposite, where what you experienced here, you really brought into your teaching. Was there, did any of the reverse happen? Things that you learned while teaching help you make this book?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, teaching has been, I think I've thought about teaching as my side job my whole life, but I've been teaching for almost 20 years now. And I have to finally admit that it's like it's like been my career as well, and I learned so much from teaching. I mean, the amount of storytelling and how to sort of tell a story, how to craft a story that I talk about and address and teach in all the years that I've been teaching has always contributed to my own story writing. And so every time I sit down to do something new, to do a new graphic novel or children's book or young adult novel or whatever, I'm usually like um talking to myself about the things that I talk to my students about. So yeah, I mean, teaching has been influencing me forever. And not to mention, the most important part is my students are so influential to me. And I just am so inspired by my students all the time. And their energy and their ideas about the world of illustration and their hopes and dreams about what they want to do literally like inspire me to write more all the time.
What do you hope? What do you? I don't want. It's not a message, but what do you hope readers take away from experiencing this book? What do you hope they feel from after reading your story?
um I guess a little bit about what we touched on earlier, this sort of inner empowerment vibe. um I really hoped the message could be that um you should try to seek out your goals and find your light, or like you should reach for high lofty things even if people tell you that you can't, and then once you get there, take it inside you. I mean, this is like, it's such a metaphor, for me in my life. And you know once you have realized that you can achieve that goal, you can't forget it because it happened. And so that's why I have the boy sort of put it inside his body. And he can't not have that light anymore because it's a part of him. So I guess the message would be that um you know don't take no for an answer when people say you can't do something. And then when you finally do it, um, you can't unsee that you did it. So don't. So that will just help you do the next thing, and you can keep that inside you. That's
Very
my
cool.
message.
So what's next for you? What's coming up?
Yeah. So I have like 3 or 4 books started or projects. 3 or 4, 3, I think. No, there's 4. Um, my desk is like each corner has a pile of like half written book on it. Yeah, I have a YA novel, that like a young adult graphic novel that I'm really, really excited about, that I've been working on. Also, I was working on it simultaneously as this one, but then this one kind of got picked up and got pushed forward. But I'm so excited about this other YA novel. It's back to like total darker themes, but it's for a younger audience, like maybe teenage audience. And I have I have 2 children's book ideas that I've started a little bit. And then I guess the other ongoing project that I've always been working on. Oh, I have a film project that I'm working on with my husband that I'm really excited about. And where I'm like he's a filmmaker, and I'm sort of taking one of his film ideas and we're turning into a graphic novel, which is really exciting. Yeah, there's a lot going on. But I also have a previous book that I wrote that with Fantagraphics that was at one point bought by a studio to turn into a TV series, and then it got dissolved. The project kind of got dropped. So we're trying to like revamp that and send it out to studios again and stuff. So there's a lot going on, but yeah, that's kind of how I roll a lot of times. Too many things going on. The kids are starting to go to school now, so there's a little bit more time.
So my final question is usually what's been the best moment of your picture book life? But you've done, like you've just mentioned, done so much creatively. So I want to give you the opportunity to do what's been the most satisfying or the most exciting or just the best when you just think of that one moment that you
I
found
saw
that when
that
you touched that sun, and you're like, I'm gonna keep this inside me.
I've been very lucky to have so many wonderful moments, like that I can't even believe. But I mean, writing this book, I'd say, I don't, I don't know. Well, first of all, turning that other graphic novel that I was telling you, like having a studio by option it to turn into a series was so exciting and exhilarating, and like developing it and actually starting to get it in development and writing scripts for it and turning it into episodes was super duper exciting. And I'm really looking forward to jumping back into that and trying to shop it around again. But when it actually got bought by a studio and it was like signing contracts for that was so exciting. Working with my husband on this film is wonderful because I just love working with him so much. He's so amazing and has incredible ideas. So like illustrating his brain is really fun. But I will say, to wrap it up, I mean, there's nothing more special in my entire career than opening up the box of books and reading this book to my son. I'm gonna cry. But that, finally getting that first book and really reading it to my little boy was amazing. Sorry. That was the best. And it was dedicated to him, and he was really like, part of that. So